Yeah.
Yeah, we just kind of go.
This is the Social Set.
All right, we are back.
Yeah!
With the
Hello.
We miss you, public.
Yo.
I can't wait for the Grammy.
Yo.
Daylight come when you wanna go home. Hey! Alright, nothing like a good Harry Belafonte, for those that remember who he was.
I don't know what that song is, but hey, it's catchy.
From Beetlejuice is where you saw it.
Oh, okay. I never seen Beetlejuice.
Oh my god,
Okay.
these young kids today, I tell you.
Anyway, so this week's topic is gonna be Atlantis. And we're not talking about like Atlantis the resort, or if there's some actual city in the U.S. called Atlantis that exists.
Atlanta.
Oh, Atlanta.
Yeah, it's a state, or not a state, but it's part of Georgia. It's a city in Georgia.
Yeah.
Oh, I don't know my American geography.
But it's not Atlantis.
But it's named after.
Okay. We're talking about the lost city of Atlantis, the legendary city that has tons and tons of myths and stories about it, but no one knows about its existence or anything like that, or whether or not it exists or anything like that. So, let's start talking.
All right, I'm ready. Well, when it comes to Atlantis, it's one of the greatest myths out there. Okay, and the thing is, it as far as it ever being written about, it all started with a famous philosopher by the name of Plato. Okay.
Plato. Okay.
Okay. 2,400 years ago, Plato sort of wrote down in his best Greek, okay, about kind of describe what Atlantis was and what happened to it. Okay. Now, he also kind of talked about it to other people and wrote down that he found out about Atlantis from his grandfather or great grandfather. I'm sorry, and his great grandfather, his name was Solon. Okay, Solon. He heard it from a businessman or a traveling businessman from Egypt. So the story actually began in Egypt. Okay. Now, that of course brings up a few things. If you remember, I mentioned the thing about the biblical,
Yeah.
kind of like the story about the flood. Okay. Well, Atlantis is kind of an example. It's a mythological or a metaphorical example of the global flood that occurred around the time of Noah, according to the Bible. Okay, but the Egyptians were the first to ever write in hieroglyphics about the global flood. Okay, these are the same people that also gave that information, or an individual from Egypt gave that information to Solon, who ended up years later giving it to his grandson. Okay, and he was Plato. Now, another thing that played on Plato's writings, which by the way he never finished. They said that he actually finished, he was writing about Atlantis mid-sentence and never finished it. Okay.
Like he just died or what?
No, they said he didn't die. He had other works after that, but he never got back to it.
Oh, okay.
Well, anyone that knows about the great Greek philosophers, Plato was actually taught by Aristotle. Anyone familiar with Aristotle?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay. So Aristotle was he was like a great philosopher and a great astronomer and stuff, and he taught Plato. And Plato also became very famous for how from what I understand, Plato actually taught Alexander the Great.
Okay.
As one of his students. Okay. So Plato was the one that kind of described everything that he heard about in his childhood. Okay, And there was a lot of mythology behind Atlantis itself. Now, we got to think about the Egyptians. Now, we like to think that Egypt, or the Egyptian people and their ancient culture, are the oldest on the planet. We know it's not true, though. We know that the Sumerian culture is even older than the Egyptian, nearly by anywhere from 1,500 to 2,000 years prior to Egypt. And they were civilized, okay? They too had a flood story. And put two and two together, the Egyptians got it from them. Okay? Now, if you think about Atlantis, the Sumerian people and their empire was the most advanced civilization on the planet up until the 1920s. Up until the 20th century, I'm sorry. No one could even compete with them, even with all our advances. The Sumerians had 39 first inventions. And until the 20th century, no one could touch them. So that's all, like, we're talking nearly 6,000 years later, okay? And so between the alphabet, the wheel was invented by them, just a systematic way of being, okay, like a structure within a civilization, down to the most minute of all things. And so what I'm thinking is that the Sumerians probably were sort of the Atlanteans, okay, because they too disappeared, okay. And Sumeria also had in their writings that they ended up discovering in the 1950s in Israel, like 10,000 tablets, stone tablets, written with their language, and it had a unique story. I mean, it was like a recording, and no society had this extensive of amount of information ever. Okay, including the computer age. Okay. I mean, you know, you think about it. When we talk about Atlantis, we really got to start looking at the oldest civilization on the planet, and therefore other people would have looked at them as magical. Okay, yeah. And they apparently, you know, besides Mesopotamia, they were outside of Mesopotamia, which is modern day Iraq and part of Iran. Okay, is sort of where it all started for the Sumerian Empire. So having said that, okay, so let's go back to the Atlantean myth. Okay, there was an American individual between 1920 into the 1950s. I forget his name right now, and I apologize. He was kind of a seer. He had over 1,200 different predictions, and one of them was that in 1969 the world would come, the Atlantis would rise again. Okay, so actually 68 or 69, he wasn't quite sure. So this happened, he made this prediction I think in the early 50s. Okay, in 1968 there was a discovery made, kind of like what he said, and right off the coast of Greece there was a little location underwater that they found, and what's the name of it? Santorino is the name of the location, and it's attached to Santorino, which is part of Greece. Okay, but this area they discovered about I want to say like 3,000 years ago. There was a cataclysmic volcano that went off, and a massive tide came over this community and took a third of it. I mean, thousands of people died, and they were called the Minotaurs people, or Minotonian, and the Minotonian people were very advanced. Okay, and even Greece at the time wasn't as advanced as these people. Okay, and so archaeologists and other scientists went to this location and they dove, and they found all kinds of artifacts. Okay, so right away, boom, they're thinking maybe this is Atlantis. Okay, now
so somebody just made the city up in the first place, is what you're saying?
No, this. Well, the ideology behind it and the mythology behind the city was that this was the city of Minotaur, the famous deity, the one that looks like a bull.
Okay.
Okay.
So basically, this place was basically what people thought Atlantis was.
Well, yeah. I mean, everything that was described in Plato's writings fit this particular finding.
Okay. Okay.
And there were things about it, like even architectural.
He wrote about this place that there wasn't any proof that it existed.
Well, here's what I believe happened. Okay, the story of Atlantis can be based on quite a few different civilizations. The fact that once in a while this planet goes through a flood anyway, because the water rises. Okay, and this isn't the only place. Santorino isn't the only location in the world that have similar connections to to how Atlantis was described. They were talking about Bolivia, which is South America. Okay.
Yeah.
They were also talking about Antarctica, Scandinavia, as in Sweden. Okay. Different locations throughout the world, including England, had an area that was underwater.
Okay.
And then and they found artifacts because the water receded, and all of a sudden all this old stuff showed up, and they have these weird lines. But here's where it gets really interesting. So the mythology of Atlantis often is mistaken as being a Nordic, meaning Norway, Sweden, Denmark, and Finland. Okay, so this is where it gets weird. During World War II, prior to World War II, Adolf Hitler and his goons, okay, which we talked about in the last episode, or in one of our episodes about the Holocaust, they were trying to find an identity for the Nazi regime, okay? And Atlantis was a great occultist type of movement anyway. I mean, it kind of got reanimated, let's say, in the 17th and 18th century, and it never stopped. So the myth and this most advanced civilization ever that lived on the planet, the Nazis wanted their hands on it. Okay, so what they ended up doing, they searched the entire planet from Africa to South America to Egypt, because remember, everything led to Egypt for some reason. Okay. And all the way into Scandinavia, they had a special division of the SS, the Scharfstutz. Remember, I told you the special unit. They were all scientists and archaeologists. If anyone remembers this, in the movie Raiders of the Lost Ark was Harrison Ford, okay, Indiana Jones. Okay, the first one. That entire show is exactly what happened. In a sense that without the drama, the Nazis were trying to find, the Ark of the Covenant. They tried to find it's called the crystal skull. That's actually real.
The crystal skull?
Yeah, that's real? Based on an actual legend.
Oh.
And it's usually found in South America. Okay. And so all these other, but they were really after Atlantis. They wanted the source that used to, because all these descriptions have been in the books for ages. Okay, even famous writers such as Jules Verne, 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea was all about the connection with Atlantis. Okay, so great writers, great politicians, horrible regimes wanted Atlantis. Okay. And believe it or not, because, in a way, and it's indirect, because of the myth, the Nazis were able to justify the Holocaust. Because Atlanteans were Aryan. Oh. They were a pure race. So the Nazis looked at it because they had all these policies about racial indifference, okay, and so they wanted the Aryan race. Now, Aryan, the word Aryan actually means Iranian. Okay, most people don't know this, but the Aryans are Persians. Okay, they used to have blue eyes and blonde hair, but then they got mixed up with the Moors. You know,
Yeah.
the more of the Barbers and the Moors and stuff like that, and then the Turks came through that area, and of course the next thing you know, not so pure after all. You know, so for some reason the Nazis looked at the Atlantis phenomenon or the myth as a way for them to not only grow powerful, but also be pure in blood and in appearance. So in an indirect way, Plato's mythology played into the Nazi regime's hand. Okay.
So yeah, he wrote about this, and he wrote about this when there was no proof it existed, and then all these people just wanted to find it. Then is what you're saying?
Well, yeah, it's like Find Waldo.
Exactly.
Okay?
Yeah.
I mean, quite honestly, and the thing is, mankind has been so fixated on this one story that a man over what I want to say, he died. He died in he was born in 420 something, and he died in 328. I remember that, or 24 and 28. Yeah, and so that was a long time ago. That's like 2,400 years ago. Okay. And this man still has an impact on our societies today.
Yeah.
Okay. And Atlantis was only one fraction of what he was able to come up with.
Right.
Okay. So he was kind of the Einstein of his era. Okay.
So go back to what you were saying about off the coast of Greece and that city that started to rise.
Santorini.
That they found. Yeah.
Well, this guy, I forget what his name is, and he's actually a famous. A seer, okay, from American history, actually. From, I think he was born like in the 1800s, and he died sometime in the 1950s. He could see things in the future, almost like the American Nostradamus, okay? I want to say Clark was his last name.
Okay.
Sometimes I forget things. I apologize, everyone. But he basically made this one prediction that Atlantis shall rise, okay? And again, Santorini is one of that region of Greece is one of the areas that a lot of people believed Atlantis was because of the Greek influence on the Atlantis myth, okay? And so, I mean, people from all around the world were diving in this location, okay? And, as I said before, there were all kinds of different locations throughout the world, outside of Asia, in areas there, into Africa, off the coast of Africa they were looking. They looked quite a few times in the Atlantic area, tried to mathematically figure it out.
Because it was called Atlantis, they thought maybe Atlantic?
Well, that was kind of a connection, okay? And again, I mean, you look at where Greece was located, it's a Mediterranean, but the Mediterranean goes right into the Atlantic Sea. So there might be a correlation to that. They even looked in Italy, near Venice, because it was a water-bound city, okay? And they thought maybe it was out there, I mean, our societies have been looking for this thing for over 2,400 years. And I don't know before that, but the connection I was trying to make here is that I do believe that it was a metaphorical explanation of what may have happened to the Sumerians.
Yeah.
Well, put it this way: there is a ginormous percentage of ocean that the world has not explored yet.
The depths of it.
We've only explored like 10% of the ocean. There's still not like 90% of the ocean that's still left to explore.
Well, correct. But what you're talking about, we haven't explored the depths of the oceans. Mm-hmm. Okay, we've probably touched almost every region within the Atlantic, the 7 seas. Let's just say that. I mean, the boats have been on top of it.
Yeah.
But we really don't know what's underneath it because
right.
I mean we do in some ways. We have new technology
at a certain point. To a certain point,
we got these little submarines that go down there.
Mm-hmm.
The non-man or what's it called? The unmanned submarines, and you're right. We used to be probably at only 1%. Now we're at about 10%.
Yeah.
And we're starting to scale it and map it out and stuff. Here's the thing, though, and going back to another subject, UFOs and stuff. Okay. There are rumors, and there's there's all this documentation that there might be cities under the water, okay, and let alone here in little Green Bay, Wisconsin, there were reports of a UFO coming right out of the water, okay, and then again, let's go talk about back to the Atlanteans, okay, who says they're not the aliens that everybody talked about, okay, you know, and then you have the Anunnaki theory, okay, the Anunnakis being from the Sumerian text, okay, the star people. Now, the Sumerians said that the Anunnakis left the planet and the flood happened, okay, and that they returned once the flood receded. Now, that's kind of odd because the Sumerians are talking the same language as the Hebrews did in the Torah, or their 5 books of Moses, when it went to the Genesis aspect of it, okay, which you call the Old Testament. It talks about the greatest flood ever, you know, in mankind's existence. And then you have the Sumerians saying the same thing. You have the Egyptians saying the same thing. You have the Persians in their own belief system talking about the flood. You have the Mayans and the Incas in their writings talking about the flood. So something did happen. Something majorly happened. I think that the Atlantean story is really about us. Okay, because I don't think they existed the way we like them to be. I think, if anything, the Sumerians were the Atlanteans. Okay, and Sumer, you know, doesn't exist anymore. Hasn't for, I want to say, for the last 3,000 years.
Okay.
If not 4,000 or 5,000, depending on whose timeline you're going on, you know. And so, again, I personally don't believe that the Atlanteans ever truly existed. I think, if anything, you want to throw it out there, they're aliens. They gotta be.
We'll talk about in another, episode. Not this season, but
Yeah, but think about it. No one's ever been able to see them. Ever.
The Atlanteans.
Yeah, because there are areas, cities underwater to this day.
And there's been there's been movies, quite a few movies made about Atlantis, because you know how much big money it is to
Well, it's to fuel our imagination.
To really amplify all these to fuel the imagination. Like for instance, the one off the top of my head that I've been thinking of, is Atlantis: The Lost Empire, Disney's animated one.
Yeah. Well, I figured that's why you wanted us to do this episode.
That's how I got interested. That's how I got interested in
well, and that's just it. That's in today's modern society, we have pictures that move. Okay, for instance, and they speak, and they tell a story, and over the years we've gotten better at it. And me and the girls used to sit and watch that show together. Okay.
Yeah.
Great story. It's got Michael J. Fox as the main character's voice.
Really?
Yeah. One of the voices.
One of the
characters. So it's really a good show. However, again, it fueled over the centuries, over the eons, good and bad things about it. As we said, the Nazis had a way of taking the mythology and turning it into policy. All right, and it is believed that the Atlantean race was a pure white race, real plain and simple.
Yeah.
And of course that's all the Nazis needed to fuel their ideology, and Goebbels was right on top of that. Mm-hmm. So will we ever truly know? No. And again, I'm saying that the idea behind the Atlanteans is truly a most advanced civilization that ever lived, which were the Sumerians. If you study Sumerians and their 39 first inventions, including agriculture, mm-hmm. okay, then they're the most advanced society of the time. Yeah. Egypt couldn't touch them, and Egypt was advanced. Greece didn't come until almost 1,500 years later.
According to a website on the internet, this is where they think it is.
I've seen that. That's an idea, and it's an old sketch.
Yeah.
Yeah, where is that?
That's in line with Greenland.
Southwest of Africa? I mean, not southwest, northwest of Africa.
Okay.
No, that's the United States. Oh yeah, north.
This is the United States over
Northwest,
here.
yeah.
This is Africa.
It's closer to Africa, right?
Oh, okay.
Well, that's one of the locations, but another one was Bolivia.
Well, yeah, there's many locations.
Yeah. So that tells you that, unfortunately, Plato kind of screwed all of society because he not only didn't finish the story, but he also he put this myth out there with his writings. And yeah, Santorini.
Yes, it says about that. It says how a volcano destroyed the island of Santorini, which is near Greece, about 3,600 years ago. And then and then it says the island was believed to be home to an advanced Minoan race at the time.
That's what it was.
Yeah, which may give credence to Plato's account of Atlantis and its destruction.
Was that right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, basically, that's because it was so close to Greece, it became a Greek legend. Okay.
Okay.
That's part of it. It was like touching the Isles of Greek. Okay.
But so basically, so the whole story of Atlantis in the modern era has blown way out of proportion, and
what's entertainment?
All the original ideas and the original concept of Atlantis is all in Plato's writings.
Well, yes, the most modern version of it. Okay, because even though it's 2,400 years ago, it's still considered the most modern. The thing about it is they say that his grandfather heard it from someone else, but the story actually goes back another 1,000 years. Okay. Again, you know how legends start. Okay. I believe this is an urban legend. Okay. I don't personally believe that Atlantis ever truly existed, but the ideology of it made it what it is today. Meaning that people really wanted to believe in utopia. Because that's what they were. They were a utopian society. The description about they were a pure racial society. Okay, and the Nazis just ate it up. Okay.
So basically, there is no actual proof that an actual city of Atlantis ever existed.
There are bits and pieces of believing it. Yeah.
However, many people believe that the whole concept of Atlantis is potentially from cities that were like a part of it was like
more advanced,
gone underwater from destruction or something like that.
Well, you got to look at it from a biblical point of view.
Yeah.
What does water represent?
Water
cleansing
or purification.
Purification.
Purification. Fire is the opposite, but it has the same meaning. But water, especially on a global level, cleanses it all. It just washes it away. Okay, That's why we use water during baptism. Okay, and when this was probably first, when Atlanta or Atlantean or Atlantis, first came into the human consciousness, bad things were happening. Most likely, people were dying every day from famine and stuff like that. Civilizations were crumbling. I mean, look at the Sumerians. One of the greatest civilizations, gone.
So
it was a purification process.
So everyone wanted to believe there was something better at one point.
Exactly.
True, because most human beings believe that we can be better than we are today.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, and I think Atlantis is utopia. Okay, the movie Metropolitan. Okay, it's a 1930s or 20s movie, famous American movie. Okay, and Metropolis is what it was called, and it was like the super city of the planet. Okay, but then it was destroyed by itself. Okay, basically that same concept. Atlantis was so advanced that it ended up that Mother Nature took care of it. Okay, and that's pretty much the description of what happened to them. And the way they were described, just like they are in the movies. The Lost Empire that you described. You ever looked at the characters? Blue and white. I mean, they're like pure white.
Oh yeah.
White hair, white skin.
Wow.
You know what I'm saying? So, if you think about it, it was definitely a ideology, not from Africa. I'll tell you that.
I was gonna say it's sad that completely white and blonde is considered the purest.
Well, they weren't even blonde; they were white haired.
Okay.
Blonde is at least a shade. Blonde is referred to as gold.
Okay.
You ever heard that? Gold is hay.
Yeah.
Gold is hay. Yeah, yeah. So it's sad. I wish it was true. I don't believe that Atlantis ever existed. I do believe it's a metaphor for other societies, especially the one that reigned until the 20th century without existing. You know what I mean? And it certainly makes a lot of money in the box office. I'll tell you that.
Well, I just remember. I think this was like the main character who actually lived in Atlantis in that movie.
Correct.
White hair, but she doesn't look pure white.
Well, she looks olive complected.
Yeah.
And maybe the white hair is what would get, but she's definitely not. She looks like she might be Greek. Minus the brown or black hair, but
right.
Yeah. And again, I think they were being politically correct too.
Probably.
I've seen pictures of him from older shows and stuff, and I've seen him look a little whiter than that. Or just like if you look at the modern day Jesus Christ description, he looks like he's from England, you know. But the real Jesus Christ was much darker.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? So it's the same thing, I guess, same concept.
Yeah.
Yeah. Very true.
But yeah, as far as
Everything
the biblical,
needs to be so PC.
mm-hmm.
Oh, and then there's this guy that was basically that girl's father and like ruler of the entire island.
Yeah, and again, you're talking a real mythical show.
Yeah.
Definitely not reality. Definitely not what we would
Definitely
normally
white
see.
hair, but the skin is.
What about the inscriptions there?
They're symbols, which is kind of funny. They almost look like they're wirings, electronic wirings. You ever?
Yeah.
Because they glow.
Yeah. So I mean, and again, I mean this show was based on some of the mythology and the advancement. I mean, they had like flying fish. You know, remember those machines? They looked like birds and fish mixed together. You know, in the show.
Yeah, because in this picture here, it's like it's an island on a waterfall. It's like.
Well, it's probably the island is actually levitated above wherever it is.
Mm-hmm. I gotta watch the movie again.
Okay.
Because I feel like they pushed like a button or something and the city rose up.
I think that's right. Something was activated.
Something was activated and the city rose up.
Okay. Now, as far as historical accuracy, I'm going to say no.
Oh no.
Although, if you read or if you learn about what the Sumerians wrote, they would be the Anunnakis. Because they were godlike.
Okay.
And Anunnaki means people from the stars.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it's funny, they're mentioned in the Bible too, the Anunnakis.
And in the movie, this is like a key thing. Remember that necklace with the little
it's a gem.
Crystal around.
Yeah, it's a crystal.
Yeah.
Yeah, and again, crystals have a certain power to them. They have energy, and they also condense energy. Therefore, we have today or radios. Without a crystal in it, you can't use radios. Okay, so and I think that that's more of a modern day understanding, and they added it to the show.
Okay.
Yes, we are talking about a cartoon.
Yeah, we are talking about a cartoon.
Yeah.
Yes, let's sit here and discuss the
Why not? Hey, we can
politics of
Yeah,
the cartoon Atlantis.
Yeah.
To sum it up, there's no actual proof out there.
There's a lot of effort out there, though.
There's a lot of effort out there from people trying to find proof, but there is currently no actual proof that a actual city of Atlantis actually ever existed. And the concept pretty much just comes a lot from cities that were destroyed by natural disasters and
like Pompeii.
And and artifacts and like structures from the city go underwater.
Correct.
And like, oh hey, it's a destroyed city underwater,
Well, and
it's probably Atlantis.
Well, but you can't blame the people either, because number one, they yearn to knowledge is everything, and
Oh yeah.
they're not only looking for evidence; they're looking for artifacts with power in them. Okay, was a modern advanced technology kind of stuff. All right, and Hitler wanted that real bad, especially towards the end of the war. He's like, we need more gifts from the Atlanteans, because honestly, he needed that oomph against the Allies. Okay, but put it into this concept. We know more about ufology and have actual proof about UFOs and other quote-unquote alien beings than we do Atlantis.
Yeah.
Because we have no proof.
Oh, we got nothing. It's all just myths and concepts at this point.
And Plato, you're at fault.
But it's also a genius for creating such a huge...
Yeah, everybody talks about it. 2,400 years later.
He made a name for himself.
I would say 2,400 years later, and bam, it's still like a huge hyped thing that people just want to find.
Do you know what happened to his teacher? Aristotle?
Aristotle? No.
He was talking about this stuff. And the Greeks, Athens, they were in Athens. They actually killed him. The Senate, because they were a democracy.
So you say that like the Greeks may know something that...
No, they didn't want him to... Okay, Aristotle was kind of a... How do you say? He was an out-of-the-box thinker. And he taught Plato how to be an out-of-the-box thinker. And he would talk about things that was unorthodox, even for the Greeks. Okay? And so one night he got arrested. They brought him in front of the council in the Senate, and they sentenced him to death.
Wow.
And it was actually kind of weird. Normally, when someone's sentenced, like in the Roman Empire, they're either crucified or brought into the lions or executed somehow. They let him go home. He had all his friends and family there, and he drank poison and died. And that's how Aristotle died.
Wow.
Yeah. By the way, I take it back. What's his name now? I'm getting like Alzheimer's or something because I'm not. Not Socrates. Plato. Duh! Like Plato you play with. Alright. Plato did not teach Alexander the Great. It was Socrates that did.
Okay.
About 500 to 700 years later.
Okay.
I just remembered the numbers that were running in my head. I remember Socrates instructed Alexander the Great, not Plato, because Plato wasn't even in the same time zone.
Oh.
Yeah.
Not the same era.
So I wanted, not at all. Like 500, almost a half a century.
Oh.
Past.
Charlie.
Yeah. So.
Charlie.
So it was Socrates. Before I get a complaint from someone that knows his history.
Yeah, so, you know what?
This guy don't know crap.
You know, that couldn't be possible.
I'm going to check this out on the internet.
Yeah, I don't even know. I don't even research this. I just know the dates don't match up.
Yep. David don't know shit.
Well, at least you don't have to correct yourself at the beginning of the next episode.
Yep,
You got that out of the way.
No, it just kind of like hit me there. But yeah, I love Greek mythology.
And we're going to talk about that in another episode, yeah.
And then you get into the gods and deities and stuff like that.
Oh, yeah.
The underworld, the top world, and
Yeah.
you know, and the funny thing is you know, the Greeks and the Romans.
I don't believe the Greek. I find it incredibly interesting.
Oh, it's very interesting.
I love learning about it, but I don't actually believe any of it's actually like, you know, my personal opinion.
Yeah. Well, you're. I hate to say this. You're conditioned in a different society, a different time, and also a different ideology.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, this was very common in the ancient world to have all these different gods. But here's the thing: people don't realize this. Not getting off the subject, but this might be in the Atlantean thing.
Yeah.
Is even though many people, many belief systems had many deities and gods and stuff,
Mm-hmm.
there was always a head god. No different from God, His angels, His saints. It's really no different. We just changed it a little, and we got rid of the pagans.
Mm-hmm.
You get my drift?
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
There's no different. We haven't changed at all. We just changed the names, you know, and the players, and that's it.
Yeah.
That's really it. I mean, if you look at... I've been studying this for 30 years. I've been scratching my head going, what is wrong with these people? Don't they see this?
Obviously not.
No.
Obviously.
Well, I'm just saying, that's what I'm saying. Is like we're conditioned to be in the box. All our lives, from the time we're born until we go to high school, and then we go to college.
And to not think outside the box.
Yeah, and then the ones that do that think outside the box get
They
punished. Or get punished in some way. As a child, they said, no, you bad boy. Can't go against the establishment. And I'm not trying to riot at all. What I'm saying is, if you look throughout history at every belief system, whether it's an ancient belief system or a close to a more modern belief system, including the most monotheistic, the three major religions today, they all are the same. They just have different players and slightly different structure, and that's it. Okay? So ultimately, and it's a human thing. It's like, we do that. So I'm going to start my own belief system.
Okay.
I'm kidding.
I know. Anything else that you want to add? Well,
You mean after my rant?
Hold on. First, Stephanie, because if I ask you, this could last a while.
Yeah, and we only got a few minutes left.
I don't have any.
You got anything?
Come on, get in there.
Nothing?
Get off your phone. Come on.
I am off my phone.
She's off
Yeah,
her
I
phone.
know. I'm just kidding.
Anything at all?
No.
Alright.
What did you learn from what I spoke about earlier?
That Atlantis probably doesn't exist and people are fighting over trying to find something that is
Doesn't
wrong.
exist.
Well, okay. Yes, I that's my personal opinion, and everything that I read and saw kind of concludes that as well.
Yeah.
But yeah,
And
yeah.
Atlantis ruled the Syrians.
Mhm.
Marians.
Aryans.
Aryans.
Yeah, Syrians, well,
Syrians.
Syrians.
Now, keep in mind, just for the sake of the show, we're not that those are just opinions that Atlantis doesn't exist. It very well could, but there's just no proof of it. For the sake of the show, there's just no proof
And
of it.
We just don't have a cure for it yet.
Yeah, but I mean, as far as it'd be cool if it existed, but
I don't know.
Makes great movies.
Show me the evidence.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, you're the forensic scientist here.
Yeah. I operate with evidence and evidence alone.
Closing remarks. Throughout the ages, children and adults like to believe stuff that we're told over and over again, and sometimes we need to be outside the box to see the truth. And that's all I gotta say.
That's very true. Incredibly true.
What about you?
Give them your last minute.
I don't really have anything, because that's all that I was really curious about, was just the whole thing about okay, so it could exist, but there's no proof or whatever, and people think that the concept might just be this and all that stuff, and that Plato just wrote the original concept based on something that is currently fictional, and we don't know if it actually exists or not, because there's no evidence from Plato. He just wrote it. We actually, there's currently no evidence about it. He just wrote it like it existed.
Correct, and of course that was based on what he heard.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
His grandfather certainly did a doozy on him.
Mm-hmm. Yep. His grandfather told him a story, and
that he heard from someone from Egypt.
I heard from someone from Egypt. Exactly.
Yeah, and so I mean, it's really a cool story if you think about it.
Mm-hmm.
But ultimately, to this date, we have not found it.
Mm-mm.
Or any evidence of it.
What ocean is right off the coast of Egypt? Is that that's not the Pacific? It's not the Indian. Is it the Indian? No.
Egypt is in North Africa.
Is it
so
Atlantic?
Atlantic,
yeah.
Egypt is on the Atlantic side.
Yeah. Because Pacific is on the west coast. Indian is up there. So Atlantic is down there. And there's 4 oceans, right?
Or 7 seas.
7 seas. Well, yeah.
They run into each other. Quite honestly, don't ask me this datum because I haven't looked at the map lately.
Well, I know that because there's anyway.
We're getting into a real discussion over here. I love
it. Anyway.
Talk about oceans.
Yeah, yeah. We'll talk about that when we get off there. Thanks for listening to the show tonight. If you want to like us on Facebook, keep up to date with everything that's going on. Facebook.com/The Social Factor Podcast. Stephanie wants to say something quickly.
The next couple of weeks are going to be crazy for this podcast or whatever, because Josh and I are getting married on the 26th.
Yeah.
So heads up for everybody on that. the next couple Saturdays are going to be jam-packed, and
You know it.
it may spill over on Sundays. We'll keep you updated
Yep.
on everything that's going on.
Yep. All right. Bye.
Bye. Thank you.
Bye.